All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to, I guess, sort of our second annual humanities or medical humanities lecture. I am Mgbechi Erondu, and I am both a pediatric anesthesiologist as well as a pediatric palliative care physician and one of your co-leads for the medical humanities faculty domain.
And I'm Joel Sheehan. I'm also a pediatric anesthesiologist and another one of the co-leads for the medical humanities domain.
So just by way of introduction, I thought I would kind of tell you a little bit of a story. There are going to be many stories in this talk, but when I was invited to arrange a medical humanities related talk, I considered going the traditional route. I was going to think about finding an expert in the field, collating articles, find something evidence-based. But I then considered how much more impactful it might be, once again, to source inward and to recognize that among us, there is so much talent and interest in the arts. But why does this matter? And as you can see from the title, as anesthesiologists, we have the unique and distinct privilege to be diviners of the human body. We know that induction and emergence from anesthesia is as much an art as it is a science. For example, how does one determine readiness for extubation? We do have our usual criteria, but at times when I'm talking to an intern or CA1, there's just this thing, sometimes you just kind of know. And so in the same way we might behold a painting in a museum and wonder about its origin, its meaning, in our daily work, we behold the great mystery that is consciousness. So let's dive in. No disclosures, Dr. Sheehan.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if this is a disclosure or not, but I am on the board for a nonprofit that will be reviewing some of the art from this during this talk.
Yeah.
Um,
So to divine is to make out by sagacity. It is intuition. So Joel, if you don't mind helping go through our learning objectives, that'll be awesome. We are first of
yeah.
all.
So we're going to interrogate the intersection between arts and medicine. And then we'll model a literary reading and response to that reading. And then we'll engage in a group discussion and or reflective writing. And then by the end of this talk, hopefully you'll be able to identify some of the medical humanities resources at Stanford.
All right, so a sculptor and a fiction writer walk into a room. What do they have in common? They're both anesthesiologists. A little morning humor, you're welcome. So by way of discussing the intersection between arts and medicine, I thought we would use our own personal stories. And, being a writer, I guess apologies in advance, but mine is going to be very textual. So we're going to start out by talking through kind of my origin, where I come from, how I got to be the writer that I am. People are often puzzled when I talk about my background. I am the daughter of Nigerian immigrants, and I actually was born and raised in Iowa, which I think was kind of fortunate because Iowa is a UNESCO City of Literature. So it's a United Nations organization that designates various cities in the world for various, I guess, literary talents. And Iowa City happens to be one of them. It's a surprise to many people. So as a child, I often went to the library and participated in summer programs. And I wrote and scribbled stories before I could even actually write. After Iowa, my family moved to the East Coast and eventually ended up in boarding school at Phillips Academy Andover. And that's where I actually learned how to sort of hone that skill. I learned how to write about being Nigerian American. One of my favorite writers is Chimamanda Adichie, who you might have heard of, who's written and also spoken about the danger of a single story. She's written a lot about what it means to be Nigerian and American, Nigerian in America, Nigerian in Nigeria. And so a lot of my early writing was inspired by her. I performed poetry as a high school student. After high school, I went on to Princeton, where I majored in anthropology, African studies, and creative writing. And there I ended up focusing on folk tales. And so I consider myself to be a folklorist. I also wrote a senior thesis where I prefaced my short stories with an anthropological introduction about what it means to be betwixt and between, specifically my Nigerian Americanness, so being between place, between culture and language, and how that came to bear on the stories I wrote, some of which were folktales and some of which were similar to the stories I read by Chimamanda Adichie. After college, I ended up in Botswana for my first ever kind of international experience. There I was a curriculum development officer for the Botswana Pediatric HIV Initiative in Gaborone. And after that time, I actually published my very first work of fiction about a little girl who experienced rhabdomyosarcoma. I had actually met a child with that condition and was struck by how I had come to specifically Botswana, thinking I was going to be seeing HIV and realizing that kids in Botswana experience the very same conditions that we do in America. And being Nigerian American, I almost felt like, shoot, I should have known this. And so it really, for me, inspired my work. So I ended up back in Iowa for medical school. That's where I got a distinction in humanities, as well as my Master's of Fine Arts in Fiction from the Iowa Writers Workshop. That's where I'm going to talk a little bit about this. I began a novel, which is still in progress. After Iowa, excuse me, I ended up at Baylor for residency, where I specifically became more involved in narrative medicine and actually completed facilitator training. And actually got to meet some of the folks who originated narrative medicine at Columbia. They came to give that training. And then I ended up at UCSF for my pediatric palliative medicine fellowship and continued my work in narrative medicine there. And now I'm here at Stanford. I'm so privileged and honored to be among you all as your medical humanities, I guess, sort of co-lead champion. And I'm also privileged to be part of the Pegasus Physician Writers Group. And you all might remember I completed the Medical Humanities Faculty Fellowship alongside some good friends of ours, Jen, Bob, Mike, Kristen. That is, I guess, a little bit about me and how I arrived. Really quickly for fun, I thought I would show you some of my childhood inspirations. I don't know how many of you remember your favorite childhood story or book. But for me, what inspires me most about children's lit is the incredible visual and imaginative nature, actually, of children's literature. They play on language. There is a lot of abstract thinking and creativities. There's myth, there's uncertainty, there's mystery, and lessons all along the way. So these are some of my favorites. I'll highlight Matilda here as the inspiration for this quote. I have discovered, Miss Honey, during my career as a teacher, that a bad girl is a far more dangerous creature than a bad boy. What's more, they're much harder to squash. This is by Roald Dahl. And if this were a live audience, I would ask you all, who said this? Miss Trunchbull. So this is what prefaces the work that I began at the Writers' Workshop. It is the story of Akugo, who's a precocious 7, almost 8-year-old girl. She's an only child with a keen ear for a story. And this novel manuscript that I began chronicles her first trip to Nigeria, her time as a primary school student at Bishop Aurora Primary and Secondary Schools. And similar to Matilda, the school's infamous headmaster terrorizes the students for the inability to master the Queen's English. Through folklore told by a mysterious shuffling lady and a secret diary of essays, Akugo discovers that she and the headmaster share a family history, and they are perhaps more alike than she thinks. In this place that is home and not home, Akugo must learn to navigate the tension between the formal curriculum she received as a second grader in America, Christian missionary education in Nigeria, and her Igbo culture. The intent behind the novel is to explore motherhood, fertility, language, and belonging. It's an homage to childhood innocence. It's a celebration of wonder. And so, as we say in my language, which is Igbo, Oruru Otumbe, once upon a time. And then I would be remiss not to share some of the things I'm reading. I'm happy to go back to the slide if folks have questions about this. Everything except for the very last are novels, some of whom have actually been nominated for big prizes, specifically the Booker. And Chioma Ebinama is a visual artist. You guys might have seen her work during my last presentation. So how does this all come together? Creative writing, African studies, anthropology, and anesthesiology. So for me, at least, it all comes together in palliative care. I got to give a big, huge shout out to my dual appointed position. Um, Palliative care for me is where this comes to bear, specifically because of the stories, because of the holistic care, the attention to biopsychosocial and the spiritual dimensions of human health and suffering. It's where attention to culture comes in. It's where the story or creative writing also comes into play. And also it's a place where actually there is a lot of doing, there's a lot of symptom management, a lot of attention to medication management, things like that. So without further ado, Dr. Sheehan.
All right. So my about me, I come from a creative family. That's my mom on the left. And in her retirement, she has become a professional photographer. Um, and then the picture on the right is actually me at my first communion. My mom made this dress, and I learned to sew from my mom. I used to drive her nuts. Sitting by the sewing machine asking her a bunch of questions, a lot of the whys. Why does the pattern say to do it this way? Why this fabric? Why this zipper? Why? And then so I learned that was my first entry into like taking materials and making them into something that was like 3D and structural. And then in the middle is my dad. His entire family is very musical. And so I grew up in a musical household, mostly listening to like Irish and like American folk music. And then some of the like 50s, 60s, and 70s, like protest rock, and then, folk rock. And family reunions with my dad's side of the family become just like hours long jam sessions where everyone picks up an instrument and calls out the next song to play. Um, we'll go to the next slide. Um, my Oh, yeah. So some of my childhood inspirations, those will come up next. I was very inspired by The Little Mermaid and The Wizard of Oz. I did choir all throughout college, or all the way up until college. And I was in musical theater. I love the costume, the pageantry, the magic, the wonder of it all. And then from my dad's family, I get inspiration from like American folk music. And this is like Woody Guthrie with his famous guitar. And then the last piece of information, inspiration from my childhood was Project Runway. I still often quote Tim Gunn at work and say, all right, designers, make it work. Yeah, and so I just love the creativity of being able to uh, impose limits on yourself and create something beautiful, which I think Project Runway really did. Some of my current inspiration, on the left, the kind of target suit is by an artist called named Nick Cave. He makes sound suits, is what these are called. He created his first sound suit in response to the beating of Rodney King by the LAPD in 1991, and he wore this suit to the protests that ensued afterwards. And he imagined extravagant costumes, sculptures to be protective shields that masked a person's identity and scrambled notions of race, class, and gender. In the middle is James Turrell. He makes sky spaces that use the science of light and our biology, the way our eyes interpret light, to make natural or artificial light itself into art. So the actual black square at the top there is open to the sky, and at sunrise and sunset, the color of the light projected onto the white ceiling changes and interacts with the sunrise and the sunset to make the sky into the art itself. And then on the right is Bisa Butler, and she's an American fiber artist who has created a new genre of quilting that transformed the medium. And then Although quilting has long been considered a craft, her interdisciplinary methods, which create quilts that look like paintings, have catapulted quilting into the field of fine art. Um, and then this last slide is a quote by Paul Robeson that I came across in my AP US history course. And it's that every artist, every scientist must now decide where he stands. He has no alternative. There is no standing above the conflict on Olympian heights. There are no impartial observers. Through the destruction in certain countries of the greatest of man's literary heritage, through the propagation of false ideals of racial and national superiority, the artist, the scientist, the writer is challenged. The struggle invades the formerly cloistered halls of our universities and other seats of learning. The battlefront is everywhere. There is no sheltered rear. And this quote to me brings together kind of the idea that scientists and artists are the truth seekers and the truth tellers in our society. And it feels very prescient at this moment.
All right. So now that we've set the stage and you've learned a little bit about us, I wanted to kind of have an opportunity to kind of mimic what we do as clinicians and kind of do some divination in practice. So I asked Dr. Sheehan to share some of her recent work for inspiration, and I wrote what came first. I tried not to over edit or be self-critical, but to write organically into what came. And so the hope is to kind of interpret the work as one does the body. But in this case, I'm not worried about the evidence or rightness or wrongness. And I think that probably for me is what makes art such a beautiful foil to what we do as anesthesiologists, and what we do in collaboration as anesthesiologists. And so let's go. Gulliver's Bridge. Every summer's eve, the Lilliputians put on their annual Rainbow Bridge event. This is a time when Lilliputians, young and old, above and below ground, gather to construct a monument that represents who they once were as a small but mighty people. This summer would be little Lucy's first year to add her great-great-grandmother's pearls to the bridge. Lucy lived with her parents above ground in a borrowed plastic bucket with cellophane windows and an aluminum foiled door. Since the days when the giant called Gulliver fell among them, there were stomping, thoughtless, glumping giants everywhere. The giants visited and crouched and pawed and marveled at the Lilliputian way of life. Some of these new giants even suggested that shrinking in size might be the solution to what ailed their climate. Human beings the size of a finger could live in a world the size of America, they said. Think of the reduction in waste, they said. But therein lies the issue. Smaller ships and planes, longer time to travel. Would the animals also be shrunk, or would birds and fish need to be tamed? And what about the insects? Mammals and perhaps even reptiles could be reasoned with, but a cockroach or a wasp? Year after year, the Lilliputians entertained convoy after international convoy, but the result was always the same. None of the new giants could agree on which continent to concentrate the shrunken world population. And so it goes. Now, one cannot expect a giant to notice or to recognize that through the centuries, much about the Lilliputian lifestyle had changed. With the advent of cell phones and computer technology, those who still lived according to the old ways, that is, of stone knives and catapults, had been driven further and further underground. No more were they the united race of small people who could tie up a giant man. They were fractured and frightened, and those that remained above ground, like Lucy's family, continued with an increasingly borrowed way of life. The giants' astronomical waste fueled their Lilliputian nation. Batteries, old charging cables, clothing made from castaway toys like Tickle Me Elmo and Furby. Certainly there was no shortage of food, but water, clean water, that worried the Lilliputians most. Lucy and her family relied on thimbles filled with rainwater and an advanced straw system which, with the advent of paper straws, needed to be reconstructed every few days. Let us return to this particular Rainbow Bridge Day. Before Lucy was old enough to participate, she would ask her parents to describe the bridge to her, and they would say, imagine the size of a strawberry seed to its flesh, an anthill to an ant. She now saw for herself that the Rainbow Bridge was a skyscraping umbrella with family jewels gathered over centuries to stud each step. Little Lucy joined the others in building the glowing bridge deep in the desert with only the elements, wind and dust, to contend with. And when all was finished, she marveled at the structure so sacred that, as legend would have it, the Lilliputians believed it would lead them back to their glory days as builders rather than scavengers. Perhaps their miniature flora and fauna would also return. Lucy had been taught in school that the horses the Lilliputian knights once rode were not extinct, but hiding in the pockets of the giant world's marsupials. The Lilliputians, Lucy among them this time, sung and danced and believed all of this, even as the sky darkened overhead and a great naked foot stomped the Rainbow Bridge into dust. All to the rhythm of a dance song, "We Found Love in a Hopeless Place."
Great. So I'll talk a little bit about our inspiration and then respond to the fiction that Dr. Erondu wrote. So the Rainbow Bridge is a 75-foot wide and 30-foot tall bridge. It is a rainbow, which is a symbol of hope, and also a symbol of self-expression, since the LGBTQ movement has adopted it as one of its main symbols. And also, bridges are inherently a symbol of connection. And as they like bridge to previously isolated or separated communities, right? And so I think the themes that we were hoping to project are self-expression, joy, hope, reunion, and things like that. So I think it's interesting, right? In the story that Dr. Erondu wrote was that we have themes of hope and ritual and joy and connection. And I think it's interesting that like this ritual of hope and looking towards a brighter future often comes from a place of oppression, right? We often are drawing on hope at times when it's most needed. I don't know, I find for myself that like when things are bright and cheery, I don't often think of myself as like hopeful, but that when things are not as bright or when things feel really dark, that's the time where I have to draw on hope.
Thanks for your feedback.
Yeah.
So we did another exercise. This is a little shorter, so don't you worry. This one is titled "A Face in the Sand." From the desert's ashes rises a figure cloaked in billowing fabric. Some say she has been there since the beginning of time, a goddess frozen with only her head and hands remaining, palms facing one another in prayer. From afar, she is a rounded hill and a pointed mountain that none dare approach or climb. The story goes that once upon a time, when all was still ocean, a window opened and sought to swallow the world as we know it whole. The other gods watched from their heavenly posts as the water drained and the winds kicked up the dust into the fine and crystalline particles we now call sand. Arms crossed, legs outstretched, the gods observed with mild curiosity, until their sister, the youngest, could bear it no longer and leapt into the vortex, stopping up the hole with her body. Think of the millennia it took to create this green planet, she told them. Think of the other planets we have observed turn to dust and ice. If we save this world, its creatures will worship us, she said. You'll see. What a waste of starlight, the more senior god said. But there she remained, and although where their sister planted became a great desert, the world around her bloomed to contain multitudes. Trees which grew like cathedrals, big-voiced animals, birds and flowers with all the colors that had since faded from her headdress. And she was right. Just when her sibling gods thought they would turn mortal from mourning, one day a people did arrive that sung and danced and worshipped her, some even dressed in her image. Hands in namaskaram, a bindi on the forehead for protection. Each human is a light beam, a small god, a point of connection, of gratitude to the divine.
So this piece was the piece that we brought to Burning Man to Black Rock City this year. Our lead artist is South Indian. He's from Hyderabad. And the inspiration for this piece is from kind of nostalgia from his childhood. There are often statues displaying the gesture of namaskaram in the like entryways or thresholds of people's homes. Um, and so namaskaram is the Telugu word or a modern language word for namaste. And it signifies or it means that the light or the divine in me sees and recognizes the divine in you. And we wanted to create a piece that signified welcoming and empathy and mutual respect and hospitality. Um, and it was really inspiring to see just the reaction from people at the event this year. Um, it was also really inspiring to see so many South Asian participants feeling really seen and represented. Um, and we got asked a lot if it was a representative of a specific deity, and it's not really. And so I think it's interesting, right, that the fiction that Mgbechi wrote goes to this deity place, but also ultimately returns to this idea that we are all divine, and that when we're in community and making that connection human to human, that is a divine connection.
Thanks, Jewel. Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure to write in response to your work, as we have discussed. It's very inspirational and impressive. I wish we could all see this, but I think we'd have to brave the elements and other things. Um, so it's your turn, audience. So what is common in narrative medicine, and similar to what I have done today, is to write in reflection to a work. And it's kind of similar to what we sometimes do in the clinical encounter, which is to kind of represent or record what we've learned. And the hope is that we might have a greater awareness of self, of one another, of our connection to one another, as storytellers ourselves, as listeners, as observers. Um, in this case, what we have is visual. And so I am going to sort of encourage the audience here and to, kind of do what comes first in response to the image I'm going to share, whether it's reflective writing, whether it's finding meaning in whatever form, whether it's drawing, whether it's thinking, no judgment, no prescription. So here goes. And I'll give it about 5 or so minutes, and then we'll kind of open up for, excuse me, Q&A or response, I guess, not quite Q&A, but. All right. I'm wondering, should we like kind of give folks a chance to respond with kind of the present image, and then maybe we can kind of go into sort of more in depth, I guess, into your work. I
Yeah.
guess I should preface, well, maybe it's better I didn't say that this is one of Dr. Sheehan's work as well, but it is. Should we check the chat? I don't think I can see the chat. There are a couple comments here in the chat. I think just housekeeping stuff, but I guess if folks feel comfortable writing in the chat, I forgot to ask if we have the ability to unmute folks. I think it's just a webinar format, so I think it's only the chat we can utilize. Right, Michelle? Okay, great. So yes, if anybody has any like thoughts, comments, we'd love to see them in the chat. Even if it's as much as what you think is going on or happening in the image, or what you think makes you say what you want to say, or what made you write what you want to write. Maybe allow a couple of minutes, maybe a minute or so, just to make sure we give folks an opportunity. Yes, it might have been intimidating. Yes, it can be intimidating for me as I was trying to describe this to Jewel. I said I'm what, like a 2D artist. I can, when I see a lot of color, I get so overwhelmed. Like when I go to one of the like those like ceramic places where you're just all you like you have the thing, just paint it. I get so overwhelmed with choice. So this is really just an opportunity for folks to chime in about what they experience, what they're seeing. It doesn't have to be super academic, if you will. And Jewel, I mean, chime in too if you.
Yeah. We have our first response, which is irony, making obvious lightheartedness in the situation and surroundings.
Awesome.
Mhm.
And I'm going to ask, assume that maybe you can see that people are sort of like dancing or moving around in face of the sign. And so that's what the lightheartedness in the situation surroundings is.
The piece brings out my rebel tendencies to refuse to do what I'm told. Yeah.
I love that.
Absolutely.
Yep. I think like the choice of red also, maybe in our daily practice, just like this kind of alarm.
Yeah, it's definitely a warning sign,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Um, and I see an invitation to define force. There's no way I can be limited to express myself. I don't normally dance, but that just made me want to. I'll add music.
That's great.
Mhm. Makes people realize how ridiculous life is and to just dance when authority is false.
So
Yeah.
yes, I love yeah, I love all these responses. I definitely resonate with pretty much all of them. I think I also have kind of a rebellious bent. Uh, and I can imagine myself dancing right under that sign.
Uh-huh.
Any others before we move on? I will read what I wrote real quick. It's very short. I wrote, the aliens are coming, no dancing. Do not show them how the legs move, how the ears work, that we have spirit, that we have joy. Do not show them that we can come together, that we see one another, that there is love, no dancing. We'll ask Jules' mom to take a picture.
Yeah. And then there's another, it reminds me of childhood when you're often told, don't blank. It's like it's like inviting a person to do the thing, to scratch the itch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And putting your ideas in public is to put yourself in public.
Mm,
Awesome.
yeah.
Thanks everyone who chimed in. Thanks everyone who wrote in silence or who reflected in silence. Thank you for your participation. Don't touch the, oh, I was just thinking about Nemo the other day. Nemo, don't touch the butt, boat, Nemo. And he's like,
You touched the butt. Yeah.
all
I
right.
think we can stay here while I
Oh,
describe.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So, this no dancing sign was 20 feet tall and 125 feet long. Um, it was designed to be seen from a mile away. Um, and it was designed to be kind of the most absurd rule that you could bring to Burning Man. They have kind of designated zones where the mobile sound stages go in the during the nighttime to have their like DJ sets and dancing and things like that. So we asked to be placed right by that mobile music zone. And so that's where you get this picture with like the crowds of people dancing in the background with our looming imperative, no dancing. And but the piece takes on a different meaning when you get up close to it. So we can go to the next slide. Each letter had crowdsourced stories of people's interactions with authority, rules, social norms. And much like everybody picked up on, it was an invitation to break and re-examine the rules. Um, and um, So some of the story, they were all crowdsourced from different members of our community. And we actually had one member of our community go to Washington Square Park in New York and just interview people and take oral histories. And we condensed them down to things that would fit on these letters. So one of the ends said, I was facing a 10-year mandatory minimum. My lawyer told me, even though I hadn't hurt anyone. At night, I dreamt of losing my family, career, and all my joy in my life. And the O said, I have OCD. My wonderful brain has developed a myriad of rules I have to follow. I feel out of balance most of the time, like I can't simply be. And so, in order to see the writing on the sign, you had to be closer to the piece, within like 50 feet or so. And so, it created this kind of like dual nature, right, of the piece where it was like looming large. You could see it basically from everywhere in the event. And only the people who approached and examined the rule got to see the kind of deeper meaning behind the piece. And I like to think of it as like an examination on who makes the rules, who's disproportionately impacted by rules or norms, who's celebrated when they break the rules, and who is disproportionately punished when they break a rule. Um, yeah, and that's our team flaunting the rules. I'm under the D in a tutu.
All right. So thanks again, everyone. I want to have a little bit of time in case there are any like additional questions. But once again, we're your co-leads for the medical humanities in the department. We collaborate with a number of these folks listed here, and are happy to connect you to those who are listed and those who are not. Whatever your interest is, wherever it lies, as you can see, you have a sculptor and a fiction writer, or well, I would say Dr. Sheen is more than a sculptor, a consummate artist, and a fiction writer, and happy to help you all in whatever area of the medical humanities you're interested in, including bioethics. Anything else I should add?
I just see some comments in the chat. One says a very big
Okay.
billboard, which is ironic actually, because the lettering, the skin on the lettering is actually recycled billboard material. So yes, it was a very big billboard. 3 of them, in fact. And then I think Audrey wanted to highlight the upcoming 35th annual Jonathan J. King lecture with anthropologist physician Arthur Kleinman, and it'll be on Tuesday, October 14th at 5:30 p.m. And there's a link in the chat under the Stanford Bioethics webpage for that. And then someone said, despite the raft of ants, there will always be outliers in the empty space, which I love.
Yes. Okay. So, I mean, that sort of was the Q&A. We have, I guess, about 10 minutes left. What are you guys reading? Where do you get your inspiration? Do you write? Do you do art? What questions do you have for us? If only we could encourage staff to question authority more often and be okay with others questioning us as leaders. Thank you for that comment. Yeah. Yes, I think a flattened hierarchy benefits all of us. You don't know what you don't know. How do you both choose to make time for your art while in a busy practice? Should I go first?
Sure, go for
Okay.
it.
Great question. The correct answer is actually the Pegasus, which is again the physician writers group that you all can join, and actually can go back to this previous slide. You do kind of have to like sort of apply. There's, and I'm happy to share the link with others. But I think that probably has been the most helpful during my time so far at Stanford, actually, is having a deadline and writing toward that deadline. So having this grand rounds presentation, writing toward this grand rounds presentation was another way for me to find time to write in my busy practice. Still finding time to work on the novel. That takes a little bit more headspace. For me, I am more of I kind of sort of like pontificate a lot. I think, and then I write. I guess probably because I write myth and folk tales, so you kind of need a lot of room to imagine. So I will get back to you on when the novel will be complete.
Yeah, I think much like Mgbechi, it is very helpful to have a deadline and a goal. And I have found a really lovely home as an artist and a maker in our group, and we have an artist's workshop in the Mission in San Francisco. So it's 5 to 10 minutes from my house, which is really helpful. And I think that one of the things I really love about this group is that they will teach you to do anything as long as you show up and are a reasonable human and you do what you say and say what you mean. And so actually for the no dancing sign or overruled, I got to learn to weld. And so that has become a new skill that I have. And it has opened up a lot of avenues to actually be participatory in the process of creating the art. How do I make time for it? I guess it becomes a priority, and I fall into a bit of an art black hole in the months of June, July, and August as we face our annual deadline to bring art to Burning Man. Yeah.
Thanks for the question.
Mhm.
All right. I think it would be nice of us, very humane, to give folks some time back in their morning. What do you think?
I love that plan.
So we welcome you all again to Medical Humanities. Thank you for giving us the space, your time, your attention. I think some folks asked maybe if we might be able to share. Oh, we have one question. Do you display your art elsewhere? That'll be for you, Jewel.
Yeah, so a lot of our art tours, and we've taken the Rainbow Bridge to Liverpool, to Miami, to Cleveland, Ohio. Oop. And then the No Dancing sign was like a temporary but long-term installation in Golden Gate Park. So from October of 2023 until November of 2024, it was installed in Golden Gate Park. And yeah, so we try to not make one-time disposable art, and have it have a life after. Um, Namaskaram is new, and so it hasn't toured or been permanently installed yet, but that is a thing that we're always hoping for the art.
Awesome. There's just a couple more comments here. This was just so beautiful and so motivating. Thank you so much. And then thank you for highlighting the creativity we carry inside. I think in medical training, we often emphasize conformity and fitting into a culture. It's so critical that we recognize that complexity that doesn't always follow the rules. Thank you so much. I feel seen. It is an absolute pleasure to be a beacon of that rule breaking, excuse me. And we look forward, hopefully, to doing this again next year. I think it'd be awesome if we had a regular kind of humanities spot, and hopefully we can feature some more folks in the department with a similar passion. All right. Have a wonderful morning, everyone.